Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the organizer of this conference for the kind invitation, and I think that it is a very big honor for me to participate in that. And I hope that this is only the beginning of our conferences, because you know, I think that many of us already participating in the many international and national conferences. And on many of them, we discussed some strategic problems, some military problems, conflicts, internal conflicts, territorial conflict, and so on. And now, for the first time, we'll have an opportunity to discuss the problems of soft power. And I am very grateful for that. As our chairperson represented me, I represented here the Institute of Oriental Studies of the Russian Academy of Sciences. If you permit me, I would like to say a few words about that. Our institute celebrates this year the 200th anniversary from its establishment. Our institute is one of the biggest academician institutes, and we studied the Oriental countries, and our Center for Indian Studies, as I can represent here, we have a long tradition of contacts with the Indian universities, with the Jawaharlal Nehru University, with the Delhi University, with the Calcutta universities, Jadavpur University, and so. And I think that it was a very big contribution to our joint studies, which we had a long time. And I also teach in the Moscow University in the Department of World Politics. And I, unfortunately, would like, I don't want, but I should say that in the past we have many Indian students in our universities. It was in Soviet times. But unfortunately now, in our department, we don't have any of them. It is very pity, because I understand that in post-Soviet period, the education has been commercialized, and now our education is also it is not free. But I can mention that we have a lot of students from China and Republic of Korea. In my group, we have a lot of them. But unfortunately, we don't have Indian students. And I think that we should think about that in future to change this position, this situation. I think that two our countries, Russia and India, over the centuries, had interaction and contacts on various levels of, I should say that we did not have any contradictions or conflict situation in the relationship between our two countries. Our relationship characterized by friendship and mutual understanding, and there has never been a need to use hard power and against each others. Representatives of the people of the two countries showed interest in discovering each other. I would like only to mention, to remind, that in the middle of the 15th century, Tver merchant, Afanasy Nikitin, one of the first European, traveled to India 30 years earlier than Vasco da Gama, found the sea road to this country. His way lay from Tver, where he began his journey along the Volga to the Caspian Sea, and then through 3 seas to India, on the west coast of which, in the south of Bombay, he landed in 1471. Afanasy Nikitin left a detailed description of his trip and stay in India. His work, The Journey Beyond Three Seas, is published in several languages and serves as an excellent source for studying the history of the establishment of Russian-Indian relations and life of the people of India. At the turn of the 18th, 19th century, the activity of talented musicians from Yaroslavl, small town near Moscow, Gerasim Lebedev, who lived in India for 12 years, contributed to the expansion of knowledge about India. He went there in 1785. He possessed some Indian languages and wrote the grammar of pure and mixed Oriental dialects, which was published in London in 1801. He gave a detailed description of the beliefs, manners, and customs of the Indians founded in Calcutta in 1795, the first European theater. Indians treated Lebedev as one of the most remarkable personalities in Indian culture of the 18th century. The scientist, bacteriologist Dr. Hafkin became widely known in India, to whom the world owes the discovery of the vaccines against cholera and plague. Hafkin lived about 20 years in India, where he went to fight epidemics from Pasteur Institute in Paris. The essential aspect of soft power is related to the culture of the country, its language, the level of scientific achievements, the attractiveness of its education and healthcare system, as well as its social economic model as a whole. The instrumental aspect of soft power includes specific institutions through which the essential aspect can be manifested. Various charitable foundations, governmental and non-governmental organizations, mass media, scientific and educational centers. Despite the fact that the post-Soviet Russia came in enough difficult economic and social positions, Russia's soft power has remained its foundation. The popularity of Russian elite theater, literature, academic music, recognized the merits of the USSR in the victory over Nazism, as well as a high level of authority of Russia in matters of space exploration. When discussing the problems of education in the modern world as one of the most important factors of soft power, I would like to emphasize that the concept of education goes far beyond the activities of traditional educational institutions, schools, institutes, universities, etc. High level of education can be provided by the high level of general culture in society, an atmosphere of interaction and mutual influence of other cultures, acquaintance with the world, achievements of science and art. The most serious and profound lessons of wisdom, the possibility of expanding our knowledge in all areas of science and life, we can learn from the acquaintances with the works of outstanding scientists and thinkers, writers and poets, figures of various kinds of art. The knowledge that we can learn from their works and arguments, their contribution to the development of culture, science, and education can serve as a unique source of knowledge for representatives of many generations of citizens of India and Russia. The very important source for obtaining and expanding knowledge about India for Russian citizens was the personality, writings, and activities of Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi monuments stand in the square of his name in the area of Moscow State University. The success of Mr. Gandhi's policies associated with the deep inculcation of the principle of nonviolence in Indian culture. The central concept in Mr. Gandhi's conception are ahimsa and satyagraha, and is called the avoidance of killing and doing harm of all living begins by action, words, and thoughts. I think that you know, that is really very important for the soft power, for our relationship. And for us, the Mr. Gandhi personal myth is associated with India's moral and spiritual authority. According to Gandhi, a non-violent revolution does not provide for the seize of power, but for the transformation of relationship, it compels a peaceful transfer of power. Mahatma Gandhi never got the Nobel Prize. Despite this omission, there is no doubt of the world importance of Gandhiji personality. When the film of Richard Attenborough, Gandhi, won many Oscars in 1983, posters for the film announced that Gandhi's triumph changes the world forever. Of particular interest is Gandhi's attitude to Russia, its culture and history. His statements about Russia and its citizens can be found in many works, books, articles, speeches, letters, and interviews. Unlike Rabindranath Tagore and Jawaharlal Nehru, Mahatma Gandhi has never been in Russia. And all this information about the distant northern country was drawn from the English-speaking press, sometimes hostile, or received from the few friends who visited Moscow and St. Petersburg in different years. The name of Lev Tolstoy, philosopher, writer, is well recognized and esteemed by the people of Asia. Both his personality and his works keep arousing interest of representatives for new generations. The literary activity of the Russian thinker ranges with classic and enduring values. His philosophical and religious views are similar to philosophic system and the religions of the East. This is particularly inherent for India, where Gandhi's system of philosophy, which became the banner of national liberation movement, formed under the influence of idea of Lev Tolstoy. The works of Tolstoy has been well known in India as far back as the 80s of the 19th century. His books were translated into European languages, including English, and were published just after being issued in Russia. Now, how soon they reached India, how they were delivered, and where were there all his works, now one can hardly ascertain. However, the reading public, to a large extent, was aware of his name and his views. Not only the impression of his books translated into English were available, there were many publications in Indian newspapers and journals. Sometimes in newspapers, a specific citation or passages from his book preceded the topic to be discussed in a certain articles. His fiction was less popular than the articles of ethical, philosophical, religious issue, and his short stories for common people. Being introduced to the ideas and statement of Lev Tolstoy, some Indians were impelled to address their questions, requests, quiet to the Russian age. Before sending his first letter to Tolstoy, Gandhi published a series of articles about the Russo-Japanese War and the revolutionary events in Russia in 1905-1907. He compared the situation in Tsarist Russia and British India and the position of broad segments of the population of both countries. He wrote, "We are poor and the Russian people are poor. We bear the burden of taxes and have no voice in the decision of state affairs. The same thing happened in Russia." He came to this disappointing conclusion. The appeal of Gandhi to Tolstoy seems logical. By the time the prophet of Yasnaya Polyana is the place resident of Lev Tolstoy, about 100 kilometers from Moscow, he had great authority. Every day he received up to 30 letters from correspondents from different countries seeking his help, support, or advice. Gandhi published in the newspaper Indian Opinion of 2nd September 1905 article called Tolstoy. In the Western world, the article says, there is no such a talented and learned person, such as eccentric as Count Tolstoy. In order to raise the morality of the people, he wrote several novels which can compare to only a few works of European writers. In his autobiography, Gandhi mentioned several works by Tolstoy. The Kingdom of God is Within Us, a brief exposition of the gospel. So what are we to do? And his other books, a strong impression on me, he wrote. Even in South Africa, he published several folk stories of Tolstoy translated into Gujarati. God sees the truth, but not soothsay. Tale of Ivan the Fool and how much man needs land. In Gandhi's articles and letters, one can find information about Tolstoy's works such as Life, Confession, What Art Is, Slavery of Our Times, and so on. But, interesting, but there is no single mention of novels War and Peace, Anna Karenina, and Resurrection. Gandhi probably never read these works at all. For Gandhi, Tolstoy was not first of all the writer, but a preacher of ideas of nonviolence. Correspondence between Gandhi and Tolstoy covers 1909 and till 1910, a time when the young Gandhi just started the socio-political activities, but Tolstoy was that period on the way to the ending of journey of his life. The first letter to Tolstoy Gandhi was sent on October the 1st, 1909 from London. He informed the great writer of the draconian laws in South Africa that infringe the rights of Indians. I felt that submission to law of his nature, that inconsistent with the spirit of true religion, he writes. I and some of my friends were and still are firm believers in the doctrine of non-resistance to evil. Experience from disobedience to the authorities in Pretoria meant for him that passive resistance is able to win their brute force retrievement. On April 1910, Gandhi sent Tolstoy a third letter and his work Hind Swaraj. Tolstoy spent a few days reading the book. As he was seriously ill, he wrote a short reply. I just received your letter and your book, The Indian Home Rule. I read your book with great interest because think the questions you treat is in the passive resistance, a question of greatest importance, not only for India, but for the whole humanity. In one of the letters, which he reads of the work addressed to Gandhi, the more I live, the more I feel inclined to express to others the feeling which so strongly move by being and which, according to my opinion, are of great importance. That is what one calls non-resistance. It is in reality nothing else but the discipline of love undermine the false interpretation. Yes. Yes. Of course, I would like to conclude that recently in Moscow, the Russian edition of Gandhi's Outstanding Leadership, written by Ambassador Pascal Alan Nazaret, was released at the Institute of Philosophy of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov contributed a foreword to the book. He termed the book a gold mine of Mahatma Gandhi's statements on the widest range of issues, giving an all-encompassing view of his philosophy of nonviolence and his applicability to contemporary nation and international issues. I think that publication of this book was also one of the demonstration of soft power in relationship between our science, between our institutions, and between our countries. I think that this relationship of our great thinkers of India and Russia and give the best example of the soft power and many aspects of our life and educational problems as well. And I think that in future, I hope that we will develop our relationship with the Indian Center for Soft Power, with the Indian Center for Soft Power and Indian Foundation, and Russian Academy of Sciences and Russian Center for Indian Studies. Thank you.